The room was suffocating, thick with the scent of lilies and whispered accusations. I stood at the back of the funeral parlor, my hands gripping the edge of a wooden pew, watching my family tear into each other like vultures over a will that hadn't even been read yet. My name's Olivia, and this was the day I realized just how far some people would go for a slice of my father's legacy. It was Dad's funeral, but you wouldn't know it from the way my cousin Brenda was already eyeing his estate. "I deserve the lake house," she hissed to her sister Karen, loud enough for me to hear. "I visited him every month." Every month? I almost laughed. Brenda hadn't set foot in Dad's house in years, not until his health took a nosedive and the word inheritance started floating around. The room buzzed with tension. My brother Tom slouched in a corner, glaring at our Uncle Richard, who kept adjusting his tie like he was practicing for a boardroom takeover. My Aunt Linda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but I caught her sneaking glances at the rest of us, calculating. And me? I just stood there, heart pounding, knowing I'd been the one changing Dad's sheets, cooking his meals, and listening to his stories when everyone else was too busy. Then it happened. Brenda turned to me, her lips curling into a smirk. "Olivia, you're not expecting anything, are you? I mean, you were just helping out, right?" The room went quiet, all eyes on me. Karen snickered, and Uncle Richard raised an eyebrow. I felt my face burn, but I didn't say a word. Not yet. Hey, before we go on, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, your city or country. It's always cool to see where these stories reach. Now let's get back to it. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the weight of the folded paper inside. They had no idea what was coming. Let me take you back a bit. Before the funeral, before the greed turned my family into strangers. Growing up, our house in upstate New York was always full. Sunday dinners, board game nights, Dad's bad jokes filling the air. I was the youngest, the quiet one, always trailing behind Tom and trying to keep up with his big personality. Dad was the glue, a hardworking man who built a small construction business from nothing. Mom passed when I was 10, so it was just us three for a long time. Tom was Dad's favorite, no question. He'd get the loud laughs, the proud claps on the back. "My boy's gonna take over the business," Dad would say, while I'd smile and clear the table. I didn't mind, much. I loved Dad, and I knew he loved me. But when he got sick 2 years ago, things shifted. Tom moved to Chicago for a better job, calling maybe once a month. I stayed. I took a leave from my teaching job, moved back into the house, and became Dad's everything: nurse, cook, confidant. Brenda and Karen? They'd breeze in from Albany maybe twice a year, always with excuses. "Work's crazy," Brenda would say, scrolling her phone while Dad napped. Karen was worse. She'd show up with her kids, let them run wild, and leave without even washing a dish. Uncle Richard only called to ask about Dad's financial plans, and Aunt Linda sent cards but never visited. I didn't expect gratitude, but I didn't expect to be invisible either. One night, Dad grabbed my hand, his voice weak but clear. "Olivia, you're my rock. Don't let them walk over you." I nodded, thinking he meant emotionally, but there was something in his eyes, a secret he wasn't ready to share. I brushed it off, too tired from juggling his meds and my own bills. Looking back, I should have listened closer. The worst was at Christmas last year. Brenda showed up with a bottle of cheap wine, acting like she'd been there all along. "Olivia, you're so good with him," she said, all syrupy. "But you know, I've been talking to Dad about the lake house. It's practically mine." I stared at her, stunned. The lake house was Dad's pride, the place we'd spent summers fishing and laughing. She hadn't been there in a decade. Tom, on a video call, chimed in, "Yeah, Liv, don't get any ideas. You're not into property, right?" I swallowed my anger, but it burned. They were already dividing Dad's life like it was a yard sale, and he was still breathing. I started noticing things. Brenda asking Dad to sign a few papers when I was out of the room. Karen whispering about fair shares. I wasn't just the help. I was the obstacle. And deep down, I knew the funeral would only make it worse. The funeral parlor felt like a pressure cooker, every glance and whisper adding to the heat. I stood near Dad's casket, trying to focus on the photo of him smiling by the lake, but all I could hear were the hushed arguments behind me. The room was packed, Neighbors, old coworkers, and of course, my family. All dressed in black, but acting like they were at a real estate auction. Brenda was holding court near the coffee table, her voice low but sharp. "The business should go to someone who understands it," she said, loud enough for Tom to hear. He snorted, rolling his eyes. "You mean you, Brenda? You can't even balance a checkbook." Karen, perched on a folding chair, chimed in. "Oh, please, Tom, you left. You don't get a say." I caught Uncle Richard nodding along with Karen, his fingers tapping his phone like he was already Googling property values. I tried to tune them out, but then Brenda's eyes locked on me. She walked over, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and leaned in close. "Olivia, you're not planning to make a fuss about the will, are you?" she said, her smile all teeth. "I mean, you got to spend so much time with him. That's reward enough, right?" I froze, my throat tight. Before I could respond, Karen laughed from across the room. "Yeah, Liv, don't be greedy. You're not the type to fight for scraps." Scraps? I'd given up my apartment, my savings, my life, to care for Dad. My hands shook, but I just nodded, clutching my purse. They didn't know about the paper inside. Not yet. Aunt Linda, always the peacemaker, tried to change the subject. "Let's just honor his memory," she said, but her voice wobbled, and I saw her glance at Brenda, like she was waiting for permission. The air was thick with unspoken deals, and I felt like an outsider in my own family. Even the minister seemed to sense it, rushing through the service like he couldn't wait to escape. As we filed out to the cars for the burial, I overheard Brenda whisper to Karen, "If Olivia tries anything, we'll handle it." Handle it? My stomach twisted. What did they think I was going to do? But their smugness, their certainty that I'd just roll over, lit something in me. I wasn't going to let them rewrite Dad's life. The burial was quick, the October wind biting as we stood around the grave. I kept my head down, avoiding the stares, but I couldn't miss the way Brenda and Karen hovered near Mr. Thompson, Dad's lawyer. He was a wiry man with glasses too big for his face, and he looked nervous, clutching his briefcase like it was a shield. After the service, we gathered at Dad's house for coffee and condolences. The living room was crowded, the air heavy with the smell of casseroles and regret. I was refilling the coffee pot when Mr. Thompson pulled me aside, his voice low. "Olivia, we need to talk about arrangements. Tomorrow, at my office. Just you." His eyes darted to Brenda, who was watching us from across the room. "Just me?" I asked, confused. He nodded, then hurried off, nearly tripping over a chair. It was strange. He'd never been jumpy before. I'd known him since I was a kid, when he'd helped Dad with the business paperwork. Why was he acting like he was hiding something? Later, as I cleared plates, one of Dad's neighbors, Mrs. Carter, tugged at my sleeve. She was a sweet old woman who'd brought Dad soup when he was sick. "Olivia," she whispered, her eyes bright with something like mischief. "Your dad was proud of you. Said you were the only one who really saw him. He told me something once about a deed." She trailed off as Karen walked by, then patted my arm and shuffled away. A deed? My heart skipped. I thought of the paper in my purse, the one Dad had given me a week before he passed. "Keep this safe," he'd said, his voice raspy but firm. "Don't tell anyone, not yet." I hadn't looked at it closely, just tucked it away, too overwhelmed with his hospice care to think straight. Was that what Mrs. Carter meant? As the night wore on, I caught Brenda staring at me again, her eyes narrowing like she could sense something was off. Tom wasn't much better. He cornered me in the kitchen, his breath smelling of whiskey. "Liv, you're not going to cause trouble, are you? We all know Dad wanted me to handle the big stuff." I forced a smile, my fingers brushing the purse slung over my shoulder. "No trouble, Tom," I said, but my mind was racing. Something was coming, something they didn't expect. And for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. Looking back, I should have seen the signs long before Dad got sick. The way my family treated me wasn't new. It was just quieter back then, hidden in small slights and offhand comments. I remember one summer at the lake house. I must have been 16, sitting on the dock with Dad while Tom and Brenda laughed by the fire pit. "Olivia's so serious," Brenda had said, loud enough for me to hear. "She's not cut out for the fun stuff." Tom had chuckled, tossing a marshmallow at me like it was a joke. Dad squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're the one with heart, Liv." But it still stung. When I moved back to care for Dad, those old wounds reopened. I'd be up at 2 a.m., helping him to the bathroom or refilling his water, while Tom sent texts from Chicago. "How's Dad? Busy here, but I'll call soon." He never did. Brenda and Karen were worse. One day I caught Brenda rummaging through Dad's desk, claiming she was looking for old photos. I didn't buy it. She was hunting for something. Bank statements, maybe, or a draft of the will. But there were good moments, too. Ones that kept me going. Dad and I would sit on the porch, him wrapped in a blanket, talking about the past. "You remember the lake house, Liv?" he'd say, his eyes distant but warm. "Those were my best days. You always made sure we had enough firewood." I'd laugh, but inside I was breaking. He was slipping away, and I was the only one there to catch him. One memory stands out. About a month before he passed, Dad called me into his room. His hands shook as he handed me a folded paper. "Put this in your purse," he said. "Don't read it yet. Just trust me." His voice was so serious, so unlike the joking Dad I knew, that I just nodded. I didn't ask questions. I was too exhausted, juggling his meds and dodging Brenda's calls about estate plans. Now, I wish I'd pushed him to explain. The worst was when Karen showed up one weekend, all smiles, with a lawyer friend in tow. "Just helping Dad with some paperwork," she said. But I saw the way her friend eyed the house like he was measuring it for sale. I overheard Karen whisper, "Olivia's too soft. She won't fight us." That night I cried in my room, not because I wanted the money, but because they were erasing everything I'd done for Dad. I wasn't just the caregiver, I was his daughter, his confidant. And they were betting I'd stay quiet. The lawyer's office was cold, the kind of place that smelled like old coffee and older secrets. We were all there, me, Tom, Brenda, Karen, Uncle Richard, Aunt Linda, sitting around a polished table like a jury waiting for a verdict. Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling slightly as he opened a thick folder. I sat at the far end, my purse in my lap, the folded paper inside feeling heavier than ever. Brenda leaned forward, her nails tapping the table. "Let's get this over with," she said, her voice sharp. Tom slouched in his chair, but his eyes were locked on Mr. Thompson. Karen whispered something to Uncle Richard, and Aunt Linda just stared at her hands, twisting a tissue into knots. I felt like I was on trial, their glances darting toward me, waiting for me to crumble. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and started reading. "To my son, Thomas, I leave my collection of tools and $10,000 from my savings." Tom nodded, like he'd expected more but wasn't surprised. "To my niece, Brenda, I leave my car and $5,000. Brenda's smile froze, her eyes narrowing. Karen got a small cash sum, and Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda got sentimental items. Dad's watch, some family photos. I waited, my heart pounding, as Mr. Thompson paused. "And to my daughter, Olivia." He hesitated, his eyes flickering to me. The room went still. Brenda leaned back, smirking, like she knew what was coming. "To Olivia, I leave. My gratitude for her care." The words hit like a slap. Gratitude? That was it? Brenda let out a small laugh, quickly covering it with a cough. Karen didn't bother hiding her grin. Tom looked at me, almost pitying, but said nothing. I felt the air leave my lungs, my fingers digging into my purse. Mr. Thompson continued, "The lake house, the business, and the remainder of my estate go to my niece, Brenda, who has shown interest in maintaining the family legacy." Brenda's face lit up, triumphant. She turned to me, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Oh, Olivia, you did so much for him. I'm sure he meant well." The room spun. I couldn't breathe. All those nights, all those sacrifices, and this was what I got? A thank you note in a will? Brenda was already talking about renovating the lake house, while Karen nodded like they'd planned this all along. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I just sat there, frozen, my hand brushing the paper in my purse. Mr. Thompson closed the folder, avoiding my eyes. "That's all? Unless there's something else?" His voice wavered, just enough to make me look up. Was that a signal? My heart raced. I didn't know what was on that paper in my purse, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. The silence in Mr. Thompson's office was deafening, broken only by Brenda's smug chuckle as she whispered to Karen about new curtains for the lake house. My heart was hammering, my fingers trembling as they rested on my purse. I couldn't take it anymore. Their smirks, their certainty that I'd just slink away. Dad's words echoed in my mind. Don't let them walk over you. I took a deep breath and stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Every head turned. Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There's something you need to see. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded paper Dad had given me. It was creased, worn from being carried around for weeks, but it felt like a lifeline. Brenda's eyes narrowed and Tom sat up straight, frowning. What's that? Karen snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I handed the paper to Mr. Thompson, who adjusted his glasses and unfolded it slowly, like he was handling a bomb. The room went dead quiet. He scanned the document, his eyebrows shooting up, then looked at me with something like relief. This changes everything, he said, his voice low but firm. What is that? Brenda demanded, half standing. Some kind of trick? Mr. Thompson held up a hand, silencing her. This is a signed and notarized deed, dated 3 weeks before your father's passing, he said, his eyes on me. It transfers ownership of the lake house and the business to Olivia, effective immediately upon his death. The room erupted. Brenda let out a strangled scream. That's impossible! Karen was on her feet, shouting, He wasn't in his right mind! She coerced him! Tom just stared, his face pale like he'd been punched. Uncle Richard sputtered, This is outrageous! While Aunt Linda gasped, clutching her tissue. I stood there, my heart pounding, but a strange calm washed over me. Dad had known. He'd planned this. Mr. Thompson raised his voice, cutting through the chaos. The deed is legal, witnessed, and binding. There's also a letter here in your father's handwriting. He cleared his throat and read, To my Olivia, you were my heart and my strength. The lake house and the business are yours because you earned them. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Brenda's face twisted, red with fury. You manipulated him, she spat, pointing at me. You were always there, whispering in his ear. I met her gaze, my voice quiet but firm. I was there, Brenda. Where were you? The room went silent again, her accusation hanging in the air like smoke. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, sinking back into her chair. Tom looked away, his jaw tight. Mr. Thompson folded the paper and handed it back to me. Olivia, we'll need to file this officially, but it's clear. The lake house and the business are yours. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Brenda stormed out, Karen trailing behind her, muttering about lawyers. The others filed out quietly, their earlier confidence gone. I stayed behind, clutching the deed, feeling Dad's love in every word he'd written. The days after the meeting were a blur. Brenda called once, threatening to contest the deed, but her lawyer backed off when he saw the notarized document. Karen stopped talking to me altogether, and Tom sent a text. Didn't see that coming, Liv. Guess Dad knew what he was doing. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough. Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda kept their distance, probably embarrassed by how they'd sided with Brenda. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I drove to the lake house that weekend, walking through the creaky front door and breathing in the familiar smell of pine and old books. This was where Dad and I had laughed, cried, and made memories. It wasn't just a house, it was home. And the business? I'd keep it running, not for the money, but because it was Dad's legacy. Standing on the dock, watching the sun set over the water, I thought about how easy it would have been to stay quiet, to let them take everything. But Dad had seen me, really seen me, when no one else did. That deed wasn't just a piece of paper. It was his way of saying, You're enough. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Life's funny like that. Sometimes, the people you do anything for will turn their backs on you. But the ones who matter? They'll find a way to lift you up, even when they're gone. I learned to stand up for myself, not out of greed, but out of love. For Dad, for our memories, for the truth. Hey, thanks for sticking with my story. If it hit you in the feels or reminded you of your own family drama, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear about it. And if you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button and join the crew. Let's keep these tales rolling.